You can see it's raining here at Dartington. I've just been outside. I'm now covered in rain. But it's time to move on and introduce our next speaker. So Tim Haywood, who's here beside me on stage, is the Group Finance Director of Interserve, and he also picks up the remit of Head of Sustainability. And Interserve's been doing a lot of work on their sustainabilities plan, a copy of which I have here, which starts to recognise social capital as one of the capitals, the four capital elements. They also have a sustainabilities hub, a link to which is on the microsite. So again, for those of you that are watching from the office or from home, picking this up on the web stream, you can access that later, as indeed can the audience here. So over to Tim Haywood.
Thank you very much, Andy. Afternoon, everybody. I want to touch on 2 or 3 important things in the next 20 minutes or so. Who am I? Question we're probably all asking ourselves at some stage on a wet January. What am I doing here? I reiterate the point. And how does it all fit together? So apart from those small points, I think we'll quickly get through this lot. So, who am I? Let's get the confession out of the way first. I'm Tim Haywood. I'm an accountant. But that's not what all I am. Thank goodness, I hear you say. I'm the Group Finance Director of Interserve, and I'm the Head of Sustainability. How on earth do those 2 seemingly conflicting roles get merged in one ordinary and old-looking person like me? Well, the Head of Sustainability is surely the guy who knows the value of everything and doesn't care about the cost. And the accountant, as we all know, is the guy who knows the cost of everything and doesn't care about value. Surely. Well, no. How did I get to be both of these things? Well, I just want to tell you a little personal story about how I get to be who I am. And it goes back to my daughter. I've got 2 kids and I'm proud of them both, but my daughter's the one who's been probing and prodding me along this particular journey. And when she was a toddler, she didn't even notice that I went to work, and she was just glad to play with me when I came back. As she got a little bit older, she'd notice that I wasn't there for chunks of the day and say, "Where are you going, Daddy?" And I'd say, "I'm going to work." As she got a little bit older again, a little bit less worried about herself and a little bit more interested in the outside world, and said, "Well, what do you do at work, Dad?" And then, as she got older into her teenage years and started studying business, she started saying, "Well, what's all that about? How does that work?" And probing and prodding and have some interesting conversations. And then she went to the Copenhagen Climate Change Conference, COP15, at the age of 16, 17, as a United Nations ambassador for youth on behalf of the UK. And she came back, and the dinner table conversations turned around, "Dad, you're in charge of a big business. You're not doing enough. There's more to business, isn't there, than just shareholder returns. There's more than just profit. You personally have got a responsibility to do something about the stuff that I've been lobbying governments about in Copenhagen." And she's right. And it's great that my mentor is my daughter. And it's great that I've got the responsibility, the power, the position to be able to influence a big organisation and to take it into a direction that Interserve was already going. Let's not make any bones about this. I'm not some zealot that's transformed an organisation into something it never was, but I had the power and the position and the remit to make a difference. And that's what I want to talk about now, is how Interserve has seized on sustainabilities and how it has latched onto social capital as part of that redefinition of what good looks like. Pauses for clicker to work. Waits in vain for clicker to work. Clicker works. Interserve, if you're Chris White MP, you may think Interserve is your archetypal megacorp. Look at us, worldwide, 50,000 people, turnover over £2.3 billion. That's a big organisation by anybody's account. And to some people, big is bad. To some people, this is exactly what we're trying not to be when we're talking about social value. Not the case. Earlier this year, almost contemporaneously with the launch of the Social Value Act, we at Interserve launched our sustainability plan that Andy was talking about and plugging, and I urge you to have a look at it on the website and the microsite and get the hard copy. And in that plan, we talked about ourselves and how we think we contribute to society, and we've split our contribution up into 4. Financial capital that everybody knows about and everybody understands, even some FDs understand that. Natural capital that is getting to be quite common and quite current, with people like Tony Juniper, our dear friend and one of our guides in this whole thing, talking about ecosystem services, which is really the value of nature and making sure we don't deplete it and being environmentally sensitive to the long term. Knowledge capital, which isn't the subject of any conversation here and is a real difficult and interesting one for us at Interserve, where we are trading on skills and knowledge and learning. I won't talk about that now. And then social capital. And that's where this and me links into what we're doing. And that's why I'm here, and that's what we're doing here. So, what is social capital as far as we're concerned? Well, it's fundamentally the things that make society thrive and flourish. And it's things like that there. Networks, communities, health, well-being, trust, yes, employment, connections, a sense of place, a whole load of things that you don't normally hear FDs talking about. But you do hear, and you should hear, companies increasingly connecting with, because all of that lot there not only makes society flourish, they present the opportunities for companies to flourish. And I think what we're moving to is the need for society and companies to coexist in a more structured and a more positive way than maybe has happened in the last few years, where there's increasingly been a disconnect. It didn't used to be this way. It used to be the case that you'd have some very good, enlightened employers, the Cadburys, the Rowntrees, the co-ops, Titus Salt, enlightened mill owners in the 19th century, who saw the role of the company and the employer and the role of society, employee, people, communities, as one homogeneous, coexisting, symbiotic thing. And I think we've lost sight of that. And with our drive to try to identify social capital as one of our key outputs, we're trying to sort of re-establish that link, because a company that operates in isolation from its society is predestined to fail. And a society that doesn't have linkages with the fundamental driver of wealth and employment and opportunities is also on a very narrow, sticky wicket. So what contributes to social capital? Some of these things here: education and employability, enterprise, innovation, investment, relationships. These aren't the only things that contribute to social capital, but they're the ones that I think have got a particular relevance and coherence for the business world. Because if you look at all that lot, a lot of that is really inherent in what makes a good business. But also, it's what's inherent in making a good society. We're having a clicker moment again. There we go. And a company has the opportunity, through its activities, to build or to erode social capital. For some purists, business activities themselves are inherently threatening to social capital. I don't subscribe to that. I believe, and always have believed, even before Daisy's intervention, that companies have great power, and with great power comes great responsibility. They have great reach. They have short communication channels. They can act decisively, and they can act with more resources than an individual can. And if you harness that, it's not a threat, it's a great opportunity to social capital. It was raining at the weekend, and I'd got no chance of going out in the garden, and I couldn't do my rowing. So I was leafing through back issues of Woman's Own magazine, as you do. And I came to the 1987 edition, and which was obviously well thumbed, and an article by Douglas Kay, K-E-A-Y, is that how you pronounce it? Anyway, which included a very famous saying, a very famous lady. Waits for clicker to work. There we go. There is no such thing as society, said Margaret Thatcher in Woman's Own magazine, 1987. And at first glance, she is irrefutably wrong. The whole of human endeavour should and surely is about creating society and making it flourish. But on further inspection, and I've actually read the transcript, that shows how rainy and dull it was and how little chance I got to garden at the weekend. What she was talking about was not the idea that society doesn't exist, but she was talking about how to make society work. And she was having a go at, in her inimitable way, the idea that you could sit back and allow society to happen to you by some all-encompassing, all-powerful, omnipresent, massively well-funded state, and that individuals and companies and third sectors should step up to the plate, because sitting back and allowing the state to do things for you, A, isn't good for you, B, isn't affordable. And now you're looking at the current situation and what is happening to the debate around the size of the state, the funding of the state, the role of the state. And one can't help thinking back to this 1987 statement about, okay, if society isn't what's given to you by the state, but what is provided for you by yourselves and your third sector partners and your companies, then that is becoming very relevant today, when we're probably in the process of discovering that we can't afford the size of government that we have already got, and that something else has got to step into that breach. And it's not inconceivable to see everybody playing a part in that, and that things such as a healthy workforce, skilled employees, using of a local supply chain, having relationships with the community in which you operate, that all of those things are actually part of the society that it's in the interests of companies to create. So, good old Woman's Own, that was an afternoon well spent. Now, what if we don't recognise and do something about social capital? What happens? Well, I fear that we are otherwise heading for what I might term the social capital bubble. And there are two precedents to this that I think are very good examples. So first of all, one of our other capitals that we look at, natural capital. I don't know how many of you have been following the work of Jeremy Leggett and Al Gore, talking about the risk that is being run by big oil and the shareholders in big oil, because on their balance sheets they have got reserves that are valued. However, the argument goes, at some stage in the future people will realise that those reserves cannot be exploited, because if they do, then we destroy the atmosphere, we destroy the environment, we destroy the world. So about 1/3 of the disclosed and valued reserves of oil companies are exploitable, and about 2/3 are notional. We are heading towards, in their view, a natural capital carbon bubble that will see the catastrophic decline of the value of big oil. That's maybe less proven at the moment. What we definitely did have was a financial capital bubble. And 2008 is long going to live in the memory of those of us who survived it as an example of what happens when you get over carried away and forget to look at all of the implications of the things that you are doing. Now isn't the time to give a lecture about what caused the financial capital bubble, but there were some overinflated assets and the demise of them caused untold damage, and that is a bubble, and it's one that we must seek not to repeat. So, taking our third capital, click, there we go, social capital. Are we heading for a social capital bubble? Do we have such a disconnect between society and individuals, between individuals and companies and society and companies, that we are facing social disconnect of the type that would lead to a bursting of a bubble like we had with the financial bubble and like we might have with the carbon bubble? And I think you can piece together all sorts of evidence that suggests that we might be heading towards that. The skills gap, the growing disparity in wages, the unemployment of the youth, removal of the funding of things that have previously been done by local and central government, the potential absence of that welfare safety net that we have got used to, and the potential absence of any alternatives to it. The sort of things that we were talking about previously in what makes the building blocks of social capital. Well, I contend that we might well, if we don't do something about it, be heading to a bursting of a social capital bubble to match the financial and the potential carbon one. This clicker makes for some dramatic pauses, doesn't it? There we go. So, how do companies influence social capital? Here we go. Well, there's lots and lots of stuff coming up on the screen here. And I think the point is, in many, many ways, and in linked ways, it's not coincidental that those are cogs in a linked picture, and that there are a number of ways in which we can actually interact. I mean, one, for instance, there, the subset around invest in skills, in work pay progression, and reduce welfare dependence. So if a company invests in the skills of its workforce, if it enables people to increase their skill sets and therefore earn more, that therefore will reduce their need for welfare top-ups, starts to address some of the challenges around the living wage debate that's raging at the moment, and that we have got something important to say in the next few weeks about, and therefore becomes and moves all the way around. So catalyses community building, etc., etc. Procurement, buying the same things, but as Landmark had said, locally, instead of buying from Big Core, putting the money back into local societies. All of these things contribute positively to social capital. Measuring it is a challenge, and it's a challenge that the Crown Estate have had a good start at, and it's a challenge that our joint venture company Landmark have made great strides in. And as a finance director, it's something that I recognise the importance of, because if you can't measure it, you can't value it. And we need to be tangible. We can't just be making broad sweeping statements that this is a good thing, isn't it? All of our sustainability program is based around the business case for it. And business cases need measurements. They don't need to necessarily be only in financial terms. They don't need necessarily to be in year and short-termist and one-dimensional. They must embrace the four capitals. They must look long-term and holistically, but nevertheless they need to be hard-headed, and they need to be able to persuade people like me. And then, influencing decision-making, we can use social capital as part of our armoury of assessing what good looks like. We've done this in West Yorkshire, where we built a series of buildings for the West Yorkshire Police, and put social capital at the heart of our delivery there. So massive amounts of investment in local employment and in the local supply chain and in volunteering and in collaboration, starting up community projects, training and skilling people, liaising with schools, mentoring and passing on the knowledge, creating well-being clinics on site. All this and many more. There's a case study on our website. Have a look at it. It was social capital in action, and it meant a huge amount to the client and to the community. I've got a red light, but I'd be much quicker if the clicker worked. And why do companies care? Companies care because without it, the license to operate may not be there. We, the companies, operate at the behest of society. And if we don't have that permission, we're dead. I don't want to name names particularly, but look at the issues that are being faced by some of the big beasts in our market at the moment because they have not paid sufficient heed to these sort of issues. Look at the impact of the Occupy movement. Look at the impact of anti-globalization, fair tax, bankers' bonuses, etc., etc., etc. It is in companies' best interests as well as in communities' best interests to pay good attention to these things and do something about it. So we're on a journey, Landmark are on a journey, Crown Estates are on a journey. I love the collaboration that goes on in this world. We're all working together, scratching our heads how to do the right thing. But we are getting there. We are leading the way. And it's a very exciting journey, and one of which I hope, Daisy, you're proud. Thank you very much.